Thank you so much, ma'am. My dear friends, let me tell you, Dr. Sheetal Chopra is my guru and mentor, and she is kind enough to accept our today's invitation. She has been very kind even to guide all of our participants how to appear for patent agent examination and even how to draft patent, right? And we are going to
Welcome back to the National Intellectual Property Convention 2022, continuing and moving on to another amazing session. Let us explore intellectual property and wealth creation towards being Atmanirbhar. And we have with us Dr. Sheetal Chopra ma'am, Director and India Lead, IPR Advocacy Ericsson India Limited, and Honorary Course Advisor, IPTAC and IP Olympiad. She is an industry professional possessing techno-legal managerial acumen, having strong experience in the area of public policy and government affairs. She's a registered Indian patent agent and an author of the book on intellectual property published by LexisNexis. She is also a course coordinator for intellectual property talent search examination, for which she has authored course material. She's an avid speaker at national and international forums with extensive experience in the area of international trade, research and advocacy, policy development at domestic and international level, assisting government in design, development, negotiation, consensus building and implementation of international trade laws, international regulations, and policy inputs that could lead to sustainable development of Indian and international economy. She has been nominated for inclusion in 30th Pearl Anniversary edition of Who's Who in the World Book of America, which includes a biography of people indicating their real accomplishment. She has also been selected as 2000 Outstanding Intellectuals of 21st Century 2013 by International Biographical Centre, England. She has also been selected and invited by International Bibliographic Centre, IBC, to receive the honorary degree of letters. She is a visiting faculty and trainer at various educational institutions, government forums such as All India Radio, National Institute of Intellectual Property Management, IIT, NLSIU, etc. She is also an editorial board member of US-China Law Review, David Publishing. I request Dr. Sheetal Chopra ma'am to take over the session.
Thank you so much. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Thanks for the introduction, Smriti. I mean, it's always overwhelming to hear about ourselves, but then this also reminds that there is a lot to achieve. Thanks for that introduction. I'll try my level best to be as crisp and brief. I know it's for 30 minutes, and maybe last 10 minutes we can keep open for any Q&A that people may have. First of all, let me thank MIT, the organizers, and more specifically Professor Raj for inviting me and for showing trust in me that I can do justice, because I can see a great constellation of experts who are speaking today and who have spoken just before me. So I'll try to do my level best. Okay, so are you able to see the screen? Yeah.
Yeah, not yet. It's being loaded.
Okay. Okay. So I think the topic of IP for wealth creation is something which cannot be really taught in just 30 minutes, right? As you can understand, it's a very comprehensive topic by itself. There are lots of on-ground realities that people face through when actually you start with a wish list to be able to monetize your intellectual property. Because anything that is just a paper tiger is certainly of no use unless you are able to bring it to the market. And it's more like a fantasy, as one of my very good friends always picks up as an analogy. If you look at Three Idiots movie, and you look at Funsuk Wangadu and Chatur Ramalingam, who is standing with a check to be given to a person who owns 400 patents. This doesn't really happen on ground in reality. Our reality is completely different. There are lots of things that have to be taken care of. So with that brief background, I'll try to just present my slides, but feel free to be in touch on this topic as we move forward.
Yeah, ma'am. Slides are not visible yet. Can you just try
Not
to?
yet visible?
Not yet, ma'am.
Okay. One second. Share. Do you see it now?
Yes, ma'am. Visible. Thank you.
Okay. Great. Okay. So let me just start with a disclaimer that anything that I speak is purely for the academic purposes. Because like I already said, IP monetization is something which on ground is completely different, and it requires a lot of skill and a lot of collaboration amongst, with your friends, whether they belong to a legal fraternity, from management. I mean, it's a combination of a lot of those when you're actually able to monetize your IP. So nowadays, when we talk about the tangible assets, these are quite given less importance because over a period of time, the value, it is just depreciating. However, when you look at the intellectual property, this is it's an intangible asset. Over a period of time, we always hear that the value is only increasing. Especially the value keeps on appreciating no matter how many years have passed. And therefore, today, if you look at the number of companies and you look at you try to map their statements that they send or submit annually to the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, showcasing their revenue, their expenses, everything, you'll see that brick and mortar related information and what all they have in form of buildings or infrastructure is quite less. More of the information you will find related to intellectual property, how much is being licensed in, how much is being licensed out. Even in the stock market, the number of companies that are able to receive maximum information and maximum stock valuation are the ones who have more of IP in their portfolio. And for example, if you look at a lot of companies such as Walt Disney, it sold up close to 5.6 billion in licensing market, merchandise in 2016 alone. Similarly, for several other companies, there is a brand value that is built over a period of time that runs into several billions of dollars. For the startups today, as we speak, and you look at the startup definition and the kind of incentives that are being given, you will very clearly find out Government of India's intent is to really recognize the startups and get them registered at DPID, only the ones that have majorly the IP portfolio. So any of the startup, I'm sure I was quite impressed to see the video that was played just before Dr. Prabuddha Ganguly had to speak about what all innovations are happening at MIT University. And there is absolutely no doubt that many of you might just come up with your own startups. And you will find that one has to be having a good IP portfolio to be able to get registered at the first place with DPID, to be able to sort of get more incentives in the form of tax breaks, in the form of subsidized money, in the form of a lot of mentorship that you will be able to get once you get registered, and a lot of other incentives. In fact, once a good portfolio of IP is picked up in the form of intangible assets, then you can really earmark an MRP to your IP and then go out in the public and then say that you have something in your hand for which you'll be able to now look for the buyers. In fact, as you would have seen across globe, of course, not yet in India, but in US and Europe, IP is now being used as a collateral. I mean, gone are the days you will just go with your gold or you'll go with your property papers to get some money in the form of a loan. Today, you can even put your book, the one that you may have authored, and take it to the bank and say that you'll be able to give the money back as a result of sales and the royalty that you are able to receive from your book itself. So this is how IPR is really changing the complete paradigm as we speak now. IP has now become a thing of a high global importance, where countries are actually using IP as an economic weapon. I mean, who could have ever thought about this just 3 decades from now? We would have thought the use of IP during social unrest. Nobody would have thought, right? Now it is being even used in the times of war. Use of IP like this was never really heard of. We have heard about biological weapons, we've heard about nuclear bombs, missiles, but today it's intellectual property which is now being used to really put a pressure on the other side of the table. In fact, we all are aware of Russia and Ukraine, a war where Russia passed a decree that it would allow free use of the patented software, chip designs, and other intellectual property that belongs to Ukraine, right? We all have witnessed this. Russia has allowed piracy of trademark and copyright of unfriendly nations, in fact. The move removes any kind of protections whatsoever for patents, trademarks, copyrights, and holders who had the registered IP. So from the hostile nations, they will not be able to now have any protection anymore. In fact, the sanction list currently includes US, Australia, Great Britain, Iceland, and so many countries, just to name. Now, going forward, let us look at some statistics from International IP Index that monitors IP environment in various countries. I think looking at the statistics, it becomes very prudent that the more IP is only increasing the country's GDP. The better you are at intellectual property, if you are a literate IP citizen, you will surely going to earn much more and better than your friends who do not have IP literacy. The IP Index 2021, if we talk about, and as you can look at the statistics which are listed in the presentation in the slide here, it highlights that the countries that have good IP environment, they have better economies with good GDP. There are some statistics from top 5 IP systems in Singapore, Japan, South Korea, Switzerland, and US. It shows that 38% more startups in these countries are more likely to attract venture capital and private equity and have 2 times more innovative output. These countries have over 550 more high value innovations that are patented per million population, besides having 5 times more knowledge output in the form of scientific and technical journals, right? So this is quite an interesting data. I thought I must present it to all of you, because when we see the data, it really brings out the true value that intellectual property is bringing to all of us. These countries are able to attract and host over 10 times more clinical trials. And this certainly helps in better growth of pharma sector, where this sector can bring safe and effective drugs. These countries also have better access to legitimate videos and music, films through a secured platform, as a result of which there is a quite incentive to the creative community that they don't find a lot of piracy for their content and they keep creating more and more for the public benefit. And there is certainly curb on the unorganized crime, which generally happens because of piracy and counterfeiting. So the nations that are providing a lot of good IP protection and an effective IP environment, you'll see those nations are rather growing. They're able to have, in fact, bring in more foreign direct investments. They're able to churn out more IP literate workforce. They're able to give more in terms of salaries, etc. Importance of IP, when we talk about it, becomes more important when it becomes a tradable entity, when it is monetizable. Else, IP protection, like I said, it's nothing but a paper tiger that holds really no value unless consumers get benefited with the fruits of the invention. Now, many a times the researchers, scientists, because even I worked as a scientist many years ago during my first, job in a pharma sector. As scientists, you become quite glued to your own invention. You feel that what you've invented is the best, and you feel that once you are listed as an inventor, you will go all hog in the market and get it monetized. But this really doesn't happen like that. Like I said, because your IP has to be such which doesn't get quickly redundant, right? The moment you are able to bring it to the market, it should be able to stand the test of time. And in order to make your IP monetizable, or to be able to bring it to the larger public, make it available, you have to see that public perceives it as a good innovation and they are able to adopt it. Whatever you can do with the tangible asset, your home, your other infrastructure that you may have, all the same can happen with your intellectual property as well when it comes to IP commercialization. Um, if, for example, you owned a piece of land, how do you really monetize it? And there are several methods, right, to monetize. You can put it on rent, you can lease your property, you can do so many things. Similar parallels can be drawn here with regard to intellectual property. In fact, startups can be compared to constructing a building, thereby building your own company. I mean, it is just not funny at all. When any startup is growing up, you'll see more and more startups are able to do better business when they are on an e-commerce platform, when they are on social media channels, when they've got their own website where people can flog, give their comments, give their inputs and everything. So most of the startups, they end up building a very good website, which is quite dynamic in nature. And believe you me, it is absolutely no fun if I say that development of the website, which is dynamic, which has a lot of features that can really incentivize your buyers to come to the website all the time, again and again. Of course, the quality of the product has to remain. That has to be embedded. That is inherent. But in order to give that, a good experience to the audience, to your buyers, you need to develop a good technology around it, right? And believe you me, I mean, it doesn't cost building a house as much, which is built up of the cement and the concrete, but much larger amount goes into tech development. And this has really given a lot of new leash of life to entire set of those students who are freshly graduated from engineering colleges, those who have done computer science. They're able to earn much more because today technology, intellectual property has become need for every startup. In fact, not only startups, if you look at the not only the tech people, but even the legal fraternity is now growing much more because every startup has to protect its intellectual property by way of IP, and they need good lawyers, they need good advisors, they need good sort of people. So if you really look at startup, it's like when they're building up their business, it encompasses almost everything. It requires them to be in touch with their chartered accountant, their IT professional who will build a good website for them, the legal community who will help them in protecting their IP. Again, the consultants will help them draft good agreements and so many other things. So IP monetization is not just confined to creating something in your R&D labs, right? You have to move out of your R&D lab and make a good consortium of friend circle who bring in different sort of skill set who can then together help you in monetizing your IP. The other part, which is about sale or assignment of intellectual property, can be done similar to selling your piece of land or any tangible property in return of a lump sum payment. This leads to transfer of IP ownership to another person. So it's a complete shift of the title, right? So IP commercialization is not confined only to licensing your IP or only to license some part of IP to somebody else. It may include complete shift of the title to somebody else, where you completely sell off your IP to a potential buyer. Licensing is another way of IP commercialization, and for my company Ericsson, we contribute a great percentage to the R&D, and it's because of consistent R&D. It's because of consistent input in terms of man hours and billions of dollars that today this company has 60,000 plus patents granted across the globe. And one of the best things that I've seen in the company is that they give out their IP to others for it makes it available to a larger audience for a major adoption. So availability should not be an issue, ideally, for your intellectual property to be able to sustain the market, to be able to then continue the innovation cycle. And your entire DNA structure should be such that you collaborate and co-create to make your IP available for a wider audience. The licensing sometimes is the key for many of the companies, right? They may not be as much into selling their IP. They may not be as much into assigning their IP to somebody else. But for some companies, licensing is the key. For example, if you look at IBM, $1 billion plus in the form of licensing fee it is able to earn every year. And thus far, close to $27 billion US in total that this company earned as a revenue, especially through licensing. So licensing doesn't only mean that you cannot use your own IP. You can certainly use it in your own products, but you can also license it to others and cross-license it. You may take in the license from other companies as well. So sometimes cross-licensing also happens. And in our own Indian Patent Act, there is a very good provision which is provided for cross-licensing. And if there is an issue that an innovator is not able to work its invention just because there is some other patent which is coming in a way, then the cross-licensing can also happen. And there are sufficient opportunities available and the provisions available in the Indian patent system as well. Franchising is another way which is equivalent to renting your home or a piece of land. An IP equivalent would be to be able to receive royalties, right? And we've seen McDonald's, KFC, Starbucks. I mean, it's even small kids know that these brands, they've been able to build their brands because of franchising. And I certainly recommend you to watch movie The Founder. Okay, this is on a true story of McDonald's. It really shows how no good knowledge, if an owner of any startup or a company doesn't have a good knowledge of intellectual property, how that person can be completely bereft of his own intellectual property. Now, the movie Founder really shows you that the one who created McDonald's, the Golden Arches, this trademark, was not able to receive even a single penny out of its own IP and such a good product that it built, just because it didn't know the nuances of intellectual property. So it becomes even more important for all of us to be aware of certain nuances right at the very beginning. And therefore, like Professor Raj mentioned about the initiative of intellectual property talent search examination, about which I'm going to talk in 1 or 2 slides, it becomes important that you all become part of this and take the IP Olympiad, understand where your invention, where your knowledge of IP lies. So anyway, we were talking about different ways to commercialize your intellectual property, and we discussed about licensing, sales, assignment. Litigation is another, but litigation is not the real right means to be able to commercialize your IP. Okay, IP litigation is generally used as the opportunity, or maybe as just the window to be able to seek reprieve, relief, because of unwillingness of certain licensees who may be just misbehaving or misusing intellectual property without your permission. So when you go through a court of law, when you knock the doors of the court to receive justice, you have to go with the absolutely clean hands. You have to make sure that you've negotiated in a good faith. You have to make sure that the kind of issues that you are raising are absolutely correct. You have to really keep your IP intact. You have to pay your maintenance fee. You have to keep it legally very sound. You have to keep your claims very, very strong, which is what, like Professor Raj spoke, during the classes, we try to find out what is the best way to draft your claims, because claims will decide the boundary of your invention, and this is where you seek protection for your IP. So anyway, there are different ways, but as a result of IP litigation, if there is somebody who is unwilling, who is not behaving properly, you can go to the courts. Today, as we speak, we have intellectual property division very recently being set up by the Delhi High Court, and we expect this to come in other metro cities as well, from Mumbai, from Kolkata, and from so many other places. We are expecting the rules to come up, but for now, we have commercial courts where IP cases are being handled. We now have a Delhi High Court, the intellectual property division. So all new innovators from MIT University, from whoever is coming up with, or even thinking of to come up with a startup, don't feel bad if you have to ever go to the court and seek enforcement of your intellectual property. I think one of the biggest trouble in our country is that IP monetization, IP commercialization, asserting your IP is still seen with a stigma, with a question mark, right? As to how come you're going to the court? How come you're asking other person to pay? Certainly, if you have intellectual property and you've done everything rightly, so you can go to the court and seek for it, right? So that right mindset has to come up. You need to feel good for your intellectual property. You don't have to feel ashamed at all if you have to ever go to the court and seek for a relief against the unwilling licensee. This is another slide where it is well-established fact now that the countries that provide effective IP regime, they become better economies, and we discussed about it. In fact, in Europe, there is a better performance that we see, and there are good pay masters with respect to IP and creating innovative products and services. Companies which own at least one patent and a registered design or a trademark, they're able to generate 20% higher revenues per employee than the companies which do not own any intellectual property. Further, these companies are paying 19% higher wages than any other company that doesn't own intellectual property or any sort of IP portfolio. Companies in Europe with patent ownership, they are able to generate 36% higher revenue per employee, and they are able to pay 53% higher wages. What all is it showing? This all shows the strongest link between the creation of intellectual property, its protection, and then developing your business over those innovative work, and then continuing to work more and more to keep coming up with the features that your audience may want, your consumers may wish. Similarly, companies which have more of design registrations, they earn 32% higher revenue, and they're able to pay 30% higher wages. Okay. And same is the case in point with companies owning trademarks, and these companies pay 21% higher revenue and 17% higher wages. Okay. So SMEs that combine different IPRs, they enjoy even higher revenue per employee. Those which are small businesses that have registered designs, trademarks, estimated revenue is close to 84% out of these IP portfolio. So SMEs that have combination of all of it, which is even inclusive of patents and copyrights, 98% revenue per employee. It all comes from IP. So this is the real strength of intellectual property. So don't take your IP very lightly. I've been talking to a lot of professors, to a lot of academicians as a result of my being honorary course advisor to IP Olympiad, which is intellectual property talent search examination. I've seen that the real threshold for them is to just have an IP portfolio because they want promotions, they want better resume, they want to have better salaries, but don't confine your IP just limited to those achievements, right? You have to really think and take your IP extremely seriously. Believe you me, if you have a good IP, if you have a good IP strategy, if you've got good friend circle, if you've got a good right network, you may never have to work in life, right? You don't have to ever seek any job. you will be the job creator. You'll be able to earn revenue to an extent that you may not be even wanting to have a salary, right? So take your IP very seriously. And the statistics that I have just shown you from other countries are really mesmerizing. These are really good to really take it very seriously. Okay, so another is about IP sales and IP assignment. Like I said, we've just discussed about different methods of monetizing your IP, commercializing your IP, and so it's 12:25 and I was given until 12:30. I'll try to finish it up in 5 minutes. Ownership in assignment can be partially transferred, it could be fully transferred, and there are a lot of nuances that we can keep discussing. This slide is quite heavy. If we were to discuss it in detail, there is a lot that can be covered, right? When you talk about IP assignment, IP, where there is a change in the title, right? For copyright per se, there is something called as moral rights. There is something called as paternal rights. That even if you have given your ownership to somebody else, let's say to a publisher for your book, who will be publishing your book, you may have given the copyright as well, but the moral rights remain with you. The paternity rights remain with you. And therefore, you will be always listed as an author. The publisher can never mutilate your work without your permission. And there are a lot of other nuances that we can continue to discuss as we talk about IP assignment. It's a very, very big topic. Maybe in next session, whenever we get the opportunity, we'll just pick one slide on IP assignment and look out for how the agreements are written, what are the specific provisions, what is the importance of signing up non-disclosure agreement, how the royalties are being calculated, how the MRP is identified. I mean, MRP, I'm just using the word very loosely, but it's not really MRP. It's basically how you value your IP, and a lot of nuances that we can discuss next time. So IP licensing, as I just mentioned, this is one of the very important ways to be able to commercialize your intellectual property. A lot of times you will see companies embroiled into IP litigation just because the two people are not able to get together and negotiate in a good faith. You know, there are different interests. IP holder would want to get remunerated for the invention, for the work that the person has done. And the pure implementer who has never created an IP, who doesn't know about IP much, they would always want to delay it, right? Because everyone knows that IP, more specifically, patents are only for a very limited time, for not more than 20 years. And there is a lot of time anyway goes into getting a patent grant. And if there is further delay in terms of negotiation from the unwilling licensee, at the end, it's only the IP owner who will be at a loss, because the patent would have gone by now. It may not have come up with the final outcome. So licensing is a very important ways that should definitely be taken care of in a very good manner, in a good faith. There are about royalties also. There is mix and match. People do. There is a percentage you can look at for a lump sum and several other things. And we've understood about IP franchising. Well, there are a lot of things that I could have spoken, but then I would just end by saying that IP is something you must take it very, very. One second. So as Dr. Raj was mentioning, this is Intellectual Property Talent Search Examination. It's an IP Olympiad, which was started in 2018. Fifth edition is soon going to be launched by the team, sometimes in July. So keep a tab on it. And I would really love to see your university come up, your professors, your students participate, because very recently on 19th April, with FICCI as an award partner, there were awards given. We had Honorable Justice Pratibha M. Singh, Delhi High Court judge, giving away awards. It was a complete mode of celebration. So I'll end up here. There are different government bodies who are supporting this initiative. So I look forward to having you there when fifth edition is launched. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. The insights on commercialization and IP monetization was really great. With this same note, I would like to ask some question on behalf of the participants. Is it really challenging for filing an international IP as compared to Indian filing? And what is your take on it?
It's a good question, Professor Raj. I mean, for an Indian startup or for Indian professors, students, it's certainly a challenge, right? Because for India, if you look at the fees, it has been reduced by 75% to 80% for education institutes. For startup SMEs, and if there is a lady entrepreneur and a woman listed, then certainly fees is much less. But then there is a PCT route one can use. There are legal counsels one would have to hire for prosecuting in other countries. It is certainly an expensive affair. But then if you have a right strategy, if you know what your invention is good for, which countries do you really want to go, then you can pick and choose your countries instead of going internationally everywhere.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Since we also have been joined by most of the startup enthusiasts across India, what do you think startups should be aware of filing for an international IP as well as Indian IP?
See, first of all, you need to be aware of your own IP law, right? Domestic IP law. There is something called as foreign filing license. If, let's say in India is not really a good market for you, and what you've developed is a global product where you want to take it ahead. So there is a section in the Patent Act, which the nuances you must be aware of, which is foreign filing license that you need to take. Also, you need to make sure that when you draft your IP, when you, especially more so the patents, you should have a very right legal counsel who will draft your IP appropriately. The claims for it. It cannot be too broad that it cannot stand the test of litigation or a legal challenge. It cannot be too restrictive that anybody make a minor change out of it and comes out of your claims. So you need to be very careful about your IP, how you're drafting, how you're getting it drafted. You need to follow the timelines, and you need to make sure that there is a single person who is given the authority to file it in other parts of the world. And then he or she can then touch base with the other legal counsels in other countries.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Now, during our college days, there was not any provision regarding IP awareness and other. But right now, across length and breadth of institutions in India, most of the efforts have been taken, and we really appreciate the efforts taken by IPTSC. Thank you so much, ma'am, and thanks to Saurabh Sachdeva sir as well. So, what do you think? How students, or what one piece of advice would you like to give the young budding professionals or young talent across Indian higher education institution, how they shall seek IP as a career option and how they shall get started?
Right. It's a very good question, Professor. See, I have seen a lot of interns working with me. I mean, those who are all India rank holders from this IP Olympiad, they come and they take internships. Sometimes they get stuck in, I don't want to do this kind of a job. I'm more interested in legal profession. I'm more interested in litigation. I'm more interested in, let's say, prosecution. When you think of IP, think with a very big open mind. IP is not only about your legal papers. IP is much, much bigger. It's about IP management. It's IP administration. It's IP assertion, IP academy, academia. There are lots of professions out there. So whenever you go, as first you do internships. Wherever you go for internships and you get IP work, take all kind of IP work that you may get in your portfolio with a happy mode. That's the only way how you can understand intellectual property 360 degrees. Otherwise, you'll always have to rely on some or the other person to guide you on certain things. But if you want to be holistic, consider all different parts of IP for at least 2-3 years, and then make a choice where do you want to develop more skill.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you. And any advice would you like to give academicians like us, how we shall motivate and engage our students to take IP as a case study as well as subjects so that they could possibly consider generating IP out of their project work during their final year projects?
Yeah, so Professor, you have seen that वो शेर को जब मुंह में जब तक खून ना लगे उसको समझ में नहीं आता. So in order to really incentivize the students, you have to get them the flavor of IP monetization, IP commercialization. I don't know whether you have an IP policy in house or not, but
Yes.
If you have, Get your students paid, get your professors paid for, as a result of commercialization. Get more in touch with industry, will be happy to buy it. The moment you get them more salary, more hikes, better promotions, and then get them share of the royalty as well. I think when they get that part, they'll automatically, it will be an automation then. You don't have to, it will be part of their DNA then.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Yeah, we have robust IP policy, which was launched in way back in 2020 itself. And we do promote incentivization of the IPs, though it may be copyright, design, because we have more than 125 courses across our institutions, and we are the University of Art, Design and Technology. So we have artists with us. We have where more number of copyrights are being generated. We have designers, industrial designers. They do a lot of design filings, and we also have technocrats, budding technocrats, our campus, where no number of patents we are expecting, and not only just for patent filing or getting it granted, but technology commercialization has been also on our forte, and it's on our prior objective, so that the technology shall be used for the mankind's benefit. Thank you so much, ma'am, for your valuable time with us today. We have been joined by Dr. Patnala sir as well. Let me share my screen. Yes. Over to you, Smriti ma'am.
Thank you, sir. And thank you, ma'am. That was very interesting indeed. The global status of IP, especially with the ongoing war and other relevant scenarios with interesting data and statistics, made the information more insightful. You also have given us very good information on and advice on adopting the IP commercialization, especially for startups and the career prospect for students. The overview on IP licensing and its types will definitely help our participants understand it better. So thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much for sharing for your valuable time. And we look forward to more such fruitful sessions from you again soon. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Yeah, we have a lot of questions, but in interest of time, we could not take it. But later on, we'll have your session, ma'am, where more number of opportunities in terms of IPTSC and other initiatives can be discussed. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.